Awesome, yeah. So before we start with some of the fundamental principles, I'd like to give a brief about my profile and background, so that you guys have context of where I'm coming from, right? So a little about me. I'm co-founder and chief executive at ClientJoy. I did mechanical engineering, and then I worked as an investment banker. As an organization and as an individual, we won some awards as well. Individually, I also serve on a couple of mentor board of entrepreneurship cells at various institutes. I also currently serve as guest faculty at some MBA institutes as well. And I've taken some sessions at different colleges around starting up entrepreneurship, product design, and growth, and so on and so forth, right? So primarily, I'm essentially a generalist, right? So I'm not kind of boxed into one thing. So I don't know one thing really well. I know a lot of things a little bit, right? So that's the first thing that's to be kind of understood a little bit about me. About ClientJoy, we are a software as a service product. So we're a low ticket and a vertical SaaS. Is what we call. Low ticket is we charge the maximum that if you are our customer, the maximum that you can pay is $49 a month, right? You cannot pay us more than that. And so hence we are a low ticket product. We are vertical because we serve a very specific customer persona. So we're not a generic software as a service. And so we primarily help agencies and freelancers manage their complete client lifecycle. Right? So starting from the leads, proposals, contracts, projects, ticketing, invoicing, and revenues. We serve about 1,900 odd customers in 30 plus countries as of now. We've raised 3 rounds of equity financing from our incubator to a group of angels to a VC. Right? So that's a little bit about me and about ClientJoy, and I'll just share a little bit about the journey as well. And so one thing that I want you guys to understand is that the degree that you are currently doing, it does not define what you end up doing in the future, right? And so that's a primary thing that if there's any one takeaway from this conversation, then it's got to be this, right? That whatever it is that you're studying, it does not define what you do in the future. So keep your minds open whenever opportunities come across, right? So and then as chief executive for ClientJoy, obviously ClientJoy since beginning was not a 35 people team. We started as a 3 people. I have 2 other co-founders, so we're 3 co-founders. We started as 3 people, and a CEO for an early stage startup is essentially a wasted resource. So my job role essentially evolved from just bringing tea for the team and keeping them motivated, to trying to then kind of building the team, to then raising funds, to then planning for the product, to implementing a growth strategy, to currently I do financial planning and resource management and sales for the organization, and then try to answer questions, right? So that's kind of primarily my job role as of now. And so so if you'll see, the degree that I did was something entirely different, and my job role was entirely different, and then currently what I'm doing with my life is completely different, right? So this is it's something that is so basic and fundamental that I kind of hammer that every time that I have an opportunity to speak with students, that don't box yourself in, right? Everything that you're doing for your degree is essentially just preparing you for the future. It's not defining what you can do. So when we recruit a user researcher or the user researcher that we have internally, there are 4 key things that we look for. So the first thing is that is the person. So if you are wanting to become a good user researcher, then are you able to listen to things that have not been said, right? Are you able to know when the other person is lying or the other person is making things up, right? Are you able to read between the lines? Are you able to identify those little nuggets of insights that are embedded between the conversations that you are having with a potential user or the research group, in whatever the case may be? The second key quality that we look for is that they know what they do not know, right? So they have a very good idea of what are the things that are in the scope, what are the things that are out of scope, what are the things that go beyond their knowledge and understanding, and they don't make things up just by themselves, right? They have a very, very good clear understanding of where they stand with the amount of data that they have, and the amount of effort that they've put in as of now. The third thing that we look for is that the person should be 100% unopinionated, right? So if you have your own opinions, you're a very bad user researcher, right? So because opinions tend to come with ego, and if your opinions are not accepted, then you will not. Then essentially it amplifies the dissatisfaction that you may have with the organization or the way that the team is moving or the product is moving, right? So you've got to be 100% unopinionated, 100% open mind for wherever the whatever direction the conversation takes. And so you've got to not have any ego. You've got to back down when any data point disagrees with your hypothesis, right? And then the last thing that we are looking for is that the person should not be agreeable, right? And it's very easy to confuse the third one with the fourth one. So being unopinionated and having disagreements with not being agreeable. But it's important to remember that as a user researcher, you may not always want to respect the hierarchy, right? So just because someone has a couple of years of experience more than you, it doesn't mean that they are right. If whatever they are saying, if that does not agree with the data, then you will say so. You will accept the outcome, because outcome may be different from what you were intending, because there are a lot of other factors that are at play. You will accept the outcome, but you'll make it clear that you're not agreeing with it and that you are under protest, right? And so these are kind of the four key characteristics that would make a good user researcher, right? Listening to things that are unsaid, knowing things that they do not know, having zero ego, being completely unopinionated, open-minded, and not agreeable. If the opinions are coming from just from the point of or position of power, right? So
yes. And Manas has a question. He just raised his hand. So if
yeah,
you want
So what I want to understand is these factors that you have placed forward for what makes a good user researcher. Is it based on your company structure or like the way you like the company to work, or is it based on certain proven models based on like a general perspective on it?
No, this is super generic, right? These are some of the things that we have discovered for ourselves. But I'm a part of a community, and a community that have built products that do $3 million, $5 million in annual recurring revenue, right? So this may be very specific to, let's say, digital products per se. Some parts of that may not apply to hardware products, but this is very, very generic and applies. So if you are working as a user researcher, let's say in fintech, or if you're working as a user researcher for an NGO, and so all of these four things will still apply to you, because no matter what you are doing, the fundamental principles of research or user research for that matter, they still stay true, right? And so so these are fairly generic. Okay, so then we'll move on to the fundamental principles, or before that, I'll actually want to share a quick story with you, right? So my friend's father runs a company that is in the business of piping cities or areas or towns, right? So what is piping an area? It essentially is, when you wake up, go to the bathroom, turn on the tap, and the water comes. It comes actually from some other source of water, which is like some kilometers away. And so that happens because the area where you live has been piped. So there is a very, very complicated network of pipes that run below the ground that make sure that water is available and running for most people, right? And so my father's company, my friend's father's company actually does that work. And so this is about, I think, 7-8 years back, maybe even more, and they came across a tender that was put out by Kabul municipal corporation, or whatever equivalent authority that they have there in Afghanistan, right? And so the tender was essentially to pipe the city of Kabul and then certain areas in and around that, right? So these guys, they did all the research that they were supposed to. They made this is the amount of material that's required, this is the amount of manpower, this is the amount of time that it will take, this is the amount of cost. And so then they, much like what happens with any other tender, they submitted a bid. They ended up winning the bid as well. Not a lot of companies want to go and work in Afghanistan because one, it's a foreign country, and so a lot of things are just complicated in terms of managing finances, and then other is it's not a fairly calm place as well. There's a perception and so on and so forth. So there were very less bids that they got, and this company essentially ended up winning the bid. And once they won the bid, they actually were trying to recheck. One of the things that they found was that they had submitted a bid considering an area that was much larger than what actually was asked for, right? And so they had prepared the bid not just for Kabul, but for Kabul, and then there are 17 other smaller rural areas in and around Kabul, and so they had priced for that, but the requirement was only and only for Kabul. So they were faced with two options, right? The first option was to go back to the government and say, hey, we've actually done this error, and so here's a smaller bid, which is actually not possible if the process is that of a tender. And so they were left with a couple of other options. So first option was to take the money, right? Because it was just more money, and so more money is always good. The second option was to go there and then actually present a plan where they not just pipe Kabul, but then also pipe the 17 other areas. They'll still end up making a profit, and in the process, they'll end up doing a favor to the government. And in your life, if you have an opportunity to do a favor to any government body, you should just go ahead and do it. Right? So they decided to go with the second option. They decided that we are going to essentially, even though the requirement is that only for Kabul, we are going to present a plan where we do it for not just for the city but also for these 17 rural areas. And there was nothing that sounded wrong with the idea. So they worked on preparing a plan. They worked on arranging for vendors. They worked on making sure that they had the right materials at the right time. They prepared this plan. It took them about 3.5 months. And then they went back to the authorities and they said, hey, you asked for this, but in the same amount of money that you already budgeted for, we're going to deliver this plus this, right? And the Kabul authority, municipal, whatever the organization was, they said no. We cannot allow for that. And so you take the money. That's okay. Tender ho gaya hai, everything's done. There's nothing you can do about it. You take more money, but you don't pipe the other areas. And so this is something that they were not able to understand. Right? Why would any customer want less for more money if the vendor is willing to do more? And it went against all assumptions, all intuitions. And so they asked them, okay, why are you actually doing this? And so the reason that they gave, and this kind of opened up their minds. Right? The reason that they gave was that Kabul is fairly progressive in the way that they treat females. However, the 17 other rural areas around the city, they're not as progressive. The only social life that women have in those rural areas is the only time when they're allowed to go out of the house is to fill water in the morning, right? So they go out in the morning, they fill water for the home, and then they meet with other women, and then that's 100% of their social life. For rest of the time, they are forced to stay inside the house. And so if those areas are also receive running water in their homes, then the government essentially will play a part in oppression of the women, right? And so and it was super counterintuitive, right? Something that is as progressive as running water, as empowering as running water, will actually end up killing social life or actually take women or will be a regressive step for women rights, right? And so that tells us a couple of things, right? And so the first thing that it tells us is, the first thing that it tells us is that whenever we are doing research, we should always figure out who is this for, right? Instead of being excited, thinking that our assumptions are correct, thinking that our intuitions are correct, and so all of us have these biases inside of us. And so instead of thinking all of those things, it's important to firstly know and understand who is this going to be for, right? And so let me just give you an example of how we do it at ClientJoy, right? So this is kind of how our user persona looks like. You guys are on the screen that has Notion opened, or you guys are still seeing the presentation?
Yes, sir.
We can see the
Yeah, the
Notion.
Notion, yeah.
Awesome. Right. So this is basically a growth basics kind of a document that we have internally prepared, right? So it's like, what's ClientJoy, what's our tagline, and then this is where we try and understand who our customers are, right? So here we say we are a CRM and growth engine for agencies, but then what are agencies? So how do you define agencies? What are their characteristics, right? What are the problems that they face? We've actually gone ahead, and this is a presentation that I'll not share for now, but we've actually gone ahead and then created their business models, right? So what are the business models that they have in-house, right, for themselves? And then we've done a little bit more around defining who our customer is. So not just agencies, but then our customers are small agencies in these verticals. This is how we define the term small, how we define the term agency is defined above. What are the locations? We've done, I think you guys have also done some amount of empathy mapping. So we do some amount of empathy mapping as well. What are the pains, gains? What do they hear, say, do, think, see? And then these are certain other growth frameworks, right? So where we try and identify where do they spend most of their time, where do they go to learn, where do they go to grow, explore, connect, make decisions, how do they pass their time, how do they shop, and so on and so forth. And then these are our funnel and activities. These are fairly growth centric. Who are our competitors and stuff like that, which may not be relevant. But yeah, so we actually join communities of our customers, and then we stay there to try and understand what are the kind of problems that they face, right? So a large part of our product development is just understanding our customers, understanding the thought process of our customers, what they are going through, what they've been through, and so on and so forth, right? There are a couple of and so my goal, which I've been trying, and the reason why I also would want access to this recording is for our company to start talking like we ourselves are our own customers, right? And so to kind of go into their shoes and understand what their problems are. So the first thing that the story teaches us is define who is it for. If the team that is preparing the plan for the tender, if they had done a lot more research, if they had understood that what's the difference between the city and the other 17 rural areas, then they would have known that at a later point of time, there's a good probability the government will say no. Or if they knew that these are the things that they don't know, then they would have thought to ask, right? Okay, this is what we are thinking, and whether we should do that or not, right? So that's the first thing. The next thing is actually what I'm trying to do right now, right? So anything that you're doing as far as user research is concerned, whenever you're presenting your work on user research, or even when you are asking questions to your audience, try and figure out if you can ask questions in forms of stories, right? Make the other person feel the pain and the joy of game for whoever or whatever work that you are doing, right? So there are n number of TED Talks that will elaborate on this point much better than what I ever could in this conversation. But use this as a starting point, right? So go through. Because stories essentially unite people, and they are much more interesting to listen listen to than just points or facts or bullets that we've identified. Right? And so this is true this is true almost everywhere. Right? This is true when you're arguing for something with your parents. This is true when you're having disagreements in your relationships. This is true when you're presenting your work as a user researcher. This is true when you're pitching and asking for money as well. This is true almost everywhere. So try and imbibe as many stories as possible in the conversations that you're having. If you and there are a couple of ways that you see this kind of play out as well. I'm not sure. So I hope that a lot of you may have seen Game of Thrones, right? Or a lot of you may have seen. There are a lot of seasons. So if you've seen Suits, or if you've seen any other great show, a lot of the characters that we end up remembering have the habit of telling stories to convey their points, right, or to convey their arguments. So think of Tyrion Lannister, think of Jon Snow, think of Daenerys, think of Harvey Specter, think of Mike, think of any of those characters, and so they've got this amazing stories to tell to convey their points, and so when you're doing research, try and figure out how can you tell stories that engage with with whoever the audience is. Right? Do we have any questions at this point of time, or shall I continue?
Any questions?
Awesome. So the next point is it's important to understand that unique is not always better, and this is another important point that you should remember, because a lot of times you will be asked this question. So whenever you come up with certain points, or whenever you come up with certain prototype or designs or recommendations or whatever the case may be, once your user research has been done, you'll be asked, how is this different from X? How is this different from Y, or whatever the case may be? And so you actually will be formed to think in the way that whatever work that you have to do should be different in some way, shape, or form, or should be unique in some way, shape, or form. Right? Many quotes you'll see online, all of them will ask you to be different, right? But it's important to remember that different is not always better, right? And so there are examples of this everywhere. KRK, Kamal R. Khan is unique, but Deepika Padukone is better, right? And so, or Shah Rukh Khan is better, or Nawazuddin Siddiqui is better, and so it's not enough to be different, or it's not even a good practice to offer unique perspectives on anything if they are not better perspectives on that particular thing, right? And so the idea should be to do the research better and not to do the research in a unique way. So a lot of times this will happen so user research is a very, very collaborative process, right? So you got to collaborate with the group of people that you are like your own team members. You also got to collaborate with your subjects. You got to collaborate with whoever it is that you are submitting the report or the points to, and so this is a very, very collaborative exercise. And if there's one thing that's important in any environment where you're doing collaboration is clear communication, right? And so the goal of so a lot of times this you may have seen in your conversations as well. So it will happen something to this effect, right? कि मैंने तो ऐसा बोला था, and then the other person goes, पर तुमने जब ये बोला तो मैंने ये समझा, right? And so and then your response could be, but I did not mean that, right? And so it's important to understand that the goal of communication is not for you to say what you want to say. The goal of communication is for the other person to understand what you want them to understand, right? And so if there is an ounce of doubt that the other person has not understood what you want them to understand, confirm it, right? Ask them to explain to you what you just explained to them, right? But it's important that the subjects that you are researching on, and this is super important even when you are asking or drafting questions, right? When you send out Google Forms to get responses from people, even the questions that you write in, it's important that you elaborate and explain to people what that question actually means. Because if you want to ask something, if they understand something else from that question, and if they reply based on that, then your user research is essentially pointless, right? And so make sure. So goal of communication is not to communicate what you want to communicate. The goal of communication is to make sure that the other person understands what you want them to understand, right? And that's when the communication has happened. There are a lot of good things around this that really great people have said as well. But almost all misunderstandings or almost all mishaps are happen in organizations because lack of good communication. The next one that is a good practice when you're doing user research is to essentially. So do we know anything about confirmation bias? Can anyone explain to me what is confirmation bias?
I believe it is trying to interpret the research in a way that confirms whatever notions you already have.
Yeah, so trying to prove basically your thought or your perspective by some sort of research, like researching in the direction that proves your point.
Yeah, absolutely. So great. Yeah, so good that you guys know about this, right? So confirmation bias is exactly that. Interpreting the results in a way that it agrees with what you want to say. And so a lot of people believe in God, or a lot of people believe in astrologers because they have confirmation bias, right? So you were walking down the road and just missed an accident. Oh, God must have done that. There's no evidence that God must have done that. But you want to believe that there is a God, and then you interpret results to kind of try and tie that with the result that you've gotten. And so a good way to start your user research would be to make assumptions that you want them to come true, and then look for data points that actually invalidate those assumptions, right? So instead of looking for things that agree with what your assumptions are, look for data points that disagree, right? So look for things that will say, hey, this is wrong, and this is primarily how science also moves forward, right? So every research paper that's written essentially makes an assumption, and then a lot of other research papers are written to try and invalidate the first one, right? And so that's kind of how we move forward, and then so that's how we should also research. Is basically a scientific method, right? So that's how we should do our research as well. Then instead of looking for things that agree with us, we deliberately, instead of trying to stop your confirmation bias, instead of doing that, just look for things that disagree. And if a couple of things disagree, you know that the assumption must be wrong, and then you move on and make another assumption, right? This is just a habit that I love for you guys to develop, and this is a very, very underrated habit. So whenever you are doing research, just write as many things down as possible, and not just things that your subject is saying. Also try and describe your subject, right? All the things. So there are a couple of benefits to this. The first benefit is that when you write things down, you'll remember it a lot better. The second benefit is that whoever is reading it, they will get a much better context, even in your absence, whenever they are going through your report or recommendations or assumptions, hypothesis, results, whatever the case may be. And the third is you'll always have something to refer back to years later, right? You may not have since you guys are in your second year, I think you guys are 19 or something like that, right? 19 or 20. And so you may not have worked on important things in the time frame of years, but it will happen, and it will happen soon. And so 5 years later, 7 years later, if you want to refer to some work that you did some time back, then there's no way if you've not written things down, right? So write as much as possible, as often as possible, as many things as possible, so that these three things essentially happen for you, right? You'll always be able to refer it later. You'll remember it a lot better, and the person who's reading it in your absence will also be able to get context. On a separate note, like apart from this, just one thing, and we are nearing the end of the presentation, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But one thing that I want to share with you is that try and find people who are just good people, right? Not necessarily good in terms of character or looks or whatever the case may be. Just genuinely good people, because things are always better. Things like running a business, or going on trips, or attending classes, going for dinner, like just in general life is better if you have good people around. And so a good goal, and you guys are super young, right? And so a good goal for you would be in the next 3 years, find, or next 2 years, you'll graduate post that. So the next 2 years, find 100 people, right? So find 50 people who are your peers. So your peers are people who are better than you at what you do, but essentially have the same status, right? In terms of how society perceives both of you. Right? So find 50 of those people. Find 40 odd advisors, right? So people who have been there and done that. So people who are a couple of steps ahead of you, right? So as in a good advisor might be people who've done who did the same course like 3 years ago. And so these are the people who you approach with challenging questions, right? You don't want to. By the way, the benefit of having 50 peers who are better than you is because you will always have some amount of jealousy for them, and you'll always try and turn that jealousy into pushing yourself to be that, right? And so you'll always have good, healthy competition around you, and you'll become better yourself. The benefit of having about 40 advisors, or people who are like your seniors, or who have been in your shoes like a couple of years ago, is primarily to reduce your cost of learning, right? So there are two ways to learn. One is to learn from other people, and second is to learn by making your own mistakes. And so if you have advisors, if you have people who've been there a couple of years before you just reach out to them and ask them challenging questions that will help you figure out what your next step should be. And then find about 10 mentors, right? And so these mentors are basically people who are probably like 10, 15, 20 years ahead of you, and they may not even necessarily be in your subject. However, these are the people who you can ask questions to in place of your parents, right? So there are certain things that you'll not, especially in the Indian society, you'll not discuss with your parents. But then these are the mentors who you can reach out to and share your deepest insecurities. Who you can reach out to and ask questions that you're afraid to even face, right? And so these are the people who you turn into in place of your parents. Having these 10 mentors essentially would change your life, because they will not give you the steps of how to get out of the situation, but they'll give you the approaches, and they'll give you the thought process that you should have to be able to get out of that, right? So peers implement healthy competition, advisors help you reduce cost of learning, and mentors will give you mental models and thought process and frameworks to get out of any situation. So as over the next 2 years, I suggest that work with this goal, find 100 people who can help you, and that's kind of pretty much it, I think. Would be happy to take up questions. So I know. So this is, as I said at the start of this, right? Is primarily a conversation around what makes a good user researcher, and then what are some of the qualities that you may want to develop. I understand that developing those qualities is not a matter of a presentation and like few minutes of Q&A. It is an approach that people take lifetimes to master. But treat this conversation as a starting point, right? And yeah, so that's kind of pretty much it. So I'd be happy to take up and answer any questions that you guys might have. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah. I have also had a question. Manas, you can go.
Sure.
So just want to understand how many, when you're conducting any user research, at what point do you realize that you have interacted with enough people or you've collected enough data? Because there's always
Mhm.
more people to interact with and more people to take data from, more points you can get information from. So at what point do you realize that okay, this is enough?
Yeah, so there's no end to it here, Manas. So it's a continuous process, right? You got to go out and keep on talking to people, keep on interacting with the groups, and so a good way. So one way that it puts a stop to it is the amount of resources that you have, right? So amount of time there. So let's say if you're doing it for my organization, I'd say, hey, we've got to release a feature, let's say 2 months later, and so we'll need a month to develop, we'll need 15 days to design, and so we've got 15 days for user research, right? So that's that in no way says that that's a correct practice, but these are just the constraints that you have to work with in real life scenarios. The other good way to look at it is that after a point, the more people that you talk to, you'll end up reaching or reaping diminishing returns, right? So what would happen is if you tend to if you plot out the number of unique insights that you get across the number of people that you have spoken to, and if you plot that, then you'll see that it will follow a bell curve, right? So let's say, as an example, so I'll take a simple example. So let's say if I want to get some insights on what module should we develop next, and so we start talking to people, and so we'll get unique insights, insights as in when we talk to a lot of people, and then at some point the curve will flatten, and then the amount of unique insights per the person that we are per the new person that we are speaking to, so the amount of unique insights divided by the number of people that we are speaking to, it will start to go down, right? And so that is so once you see that it is starting to go down, is a good point to stop, right? But there's no clear answer. There's no okay, you should speak to 100 people, 500 people, 1000 people. You can speak to as many people as the resources allow you to, or you could speak to as many people once you and then when you start seeing diminishing returns, you just stop and then you move on to the next problem to solve. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sort of. I mean, like.
नहीं पूछना यार, अपने को sort of से कभी खुश नहीं होने का. So what specific part of the question that you'd like more clarity on?
So, what is that? I guess that something got to stop, but how do I ensure that my product that I've done, like the research that I'm doing, it actually solves the problem? And like, what if there is this one form of user that I've not reached out to? That these questions will always be there, right? So at what point, like, how do I satisfy myself that okay, I've covered all possible users and I've covered all possible points that I can get to create a product?
So बहुत ही उम्दा क्वेश्चन है, राइट? So this kind of talks about another thing altogether, right? So अपने साथ लाइफ में क्या होता है पता है कि up until we are 22, 23, almost everything is certain, right? So you know what actions you have to take, and then you also know that if you take those actions or if you don't take those actions, then these are the possible outcomes or consequences, right? So मतलब अगर स्कूल में अच्छा पढ़ाई किया तो अच्छा रैंक आएगा, तो टीचर खुश होगा, पेरेंट खुश होगा. फिर 12th के बाद मतलब अगर 12th में अच्छा नंबर आया तो अच्छा कॉलेज मिलेगा, वो कॉलेज में अच्छा परफॉर्म किया तो कोई कंपनी में जॉब मिलेगा. सो वी नो कि अच्छा अगर अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं किया तो जॉब नहीं मिलेगा, या whatever the case may be, right? So we know that this is the action and then this is the result, and then these are the things that I need to do from action to result. After 22, 23, what happens is that a lot of uncertainty kicks into lives, right? So अपन मैथ में जब 9th स्टैंडर्ड या 10th स्टैंडर्ड में थे ना, तो मैथ्स में होता था पता है कि अगर if we want to solve for 2 variables, then we need to have 2 equations, right? So अगर x और y का सॉल्व करना है तो 2 इक्वेशन होगा तो ही x और y का सॉल्व होगा. अगर 3 वेरिएबल का सॉल्व करना है तो 3 इक्वेशन चाहिए. 4 वेरिएबल का सॉल्व करना है तो 4 वेरिएबल चाहिए, राइट? पर अगर तुम्हें 4 वेरिएबल का सॉल्व करना है और तुम्हारे पास अगर 2 ही इक्वेशन है, तो द ओनली वे टू सॉल्व दैट इज हिट एंड मतलब ट्रायल and see whether that is working out or not. There's no other way. Life after 22 is life with 4 variables and 2 equations, right? So we will not be able to have a definite connection between action and outcome, right? And so the only thing that we've got to do is we've got to become more comfortable of living in scenarios that are uncertain in nature. You will never have, so even people who, the only thing is market validation, right? And so you will have to be very, very comfortable with the fact, with the uncertainty, that there's just no way that you'll know whether this is a good product or a bad product, or this solves the problem or this doesn't solve the problem, or have I. So I'll give you another question, right? I'll give you another situation. So let's say everything else is figured out. How do you even know whether you ask the right questions or not? How do you know whether you have asked enough questions or not? You won't, right? And so the goal is to be comfortable in the uncertainty, and then try and learn from other people and minimize the risk of failure. You'll never know what success looks like. So the only thing that you can do is minimize the risk of failure. And that's why thought process and mental models are important. But before that, uncertainty is super important, right? So you'll not, the answer to your question is that the answer doesn't exist. You ask, a user researcher of Zomato or Uber or Flipkart, Facebook, Google, whatever the case may be, right? All of them will say that we start with experiments and then we see what works, and then we double down on the things that work. The things that don't work, we move on. So think of it this way. Google has billions of dollars in its war chest, right? Still, the project that you're working on is that of, I think, and I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but the project that you're working on is why Google Glass failed. So अगर उनके पास इतना पैसा है, इतना रिसोर्स है, तो उन्होंने इतना रिसर्च तो किया ही होगा कि they should have known that this is not going to work, or what should we do to make it work, right? So failure तो मतलब आने ही वाला है, आपको पता नहीं होगा कि कितना रिसर्च करना है, and this kind of applies to all walks of life, right? कि uncertainty तो रहेगा, उसके साथ comfortable हो जाना है. That's the only thing. I've actually answered your question by saying that there's no answer, but यार थोड़ा ये reality type का चीज है.
Doesn't make sense, sir.
Awesome. Any other questions that I can answer for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, I don't know if it's directly related or not, but it's like user research, and like the whole thing requires a lot of research, a lot talking to a lot of people, and basically going out there and finding each and everything that is possible for you to deliver the product that is possible.
Correct.
And that is like useful for the target audience. So that requires talking, and also how like would someone who is like ambivert or someone who's an introvert would like be a part of that kind of process without or it's not even without, but how can that particular person be part of that process? Like how can that particular person like?
So there are so there are two ways to look at it, right? And so there are a lot of introverts who work in user research, right? And so what they do is a couple of things. So first is that it's not necessary that all the insights come from talking to people. Mm-hmm. And if you end up doing this as a part of your career, you realize that most of the insights that come from talking to people are a lot of times wrong, because people just lie, right? People have a lot of different so I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if this is recording, so I'll move on from that example, but yeah, so you ask people certain questions, let's say about their personal life. Just try and asking your friends, for a fact that they are lying answering to this particular question. And so talking to people is only one small part of user research. A larger part exists where you actually analyze data of how people use a particular product, right? So So as an example, what happens at ClientJoy is that we talk to certain amount of users and we understand what their context is, what their background is, what their requirements are, what are the things that they don't like about the product, what are the things that they do, what are the things that they feel, what are the things that we feel give them the most amount of value, what are the things that they feel give them the most amount of value. And then there's a whole other set of user research which happens on understanding how they use the product, right? So we essentially look at what are the kind of interactions that they are having with the product, at what points of trying to achieve their goal. So let's say if the goal is to send out a proposal to a potential customer, right? While drafting the proposal or designing the proposal, how many times did they feel frustration? How many times did they want to do a micro goal, and then they were not able to figure out how? And so we actually look through all of those screen recordings. We look through them using the product, and then kind of derive our insights out of those things as well. It is only when you put the user conversation and the database insights, it is only when you put both of them together that you'll be able to get what could potentially be your next steps, right? So if you're an introvert, if you don't like talking to people, my first recommendation is it's not like a Herculean task. Talking to other people, we are social animals, and so try and change yourself and talk to as many people around. It's not that difficult. But then let's say if that's still not possible, there's a whole larger user research area which is around how much cognitive load do people face, how much how humans interact with machines. Looking at doing data analysis to identify insights. So there's a much larger user research field that exists apart from talking to people as well.
Right. Correct.
But my first recommendation would be talk to people. Most people are bad, but it's just fun. So yeah.
Yeah, I think even Anubhav kind of mentioned just that if you talk to people, they might just lie, and like you might not get the entire truth from people's perspective, because they would tell you what they want you to know, like that necessarily might not
And
be.
there are
a good example is
so
please go ahead.
No, I was just saying there are like a lot of factors when people lie, right? I mean, so I have an experience of working in low income communities, right? And when you ask them ki electricity hai, aati hai, like पानी आता है, they don't want to know कि उनकी life ऐसी है, right? They want to build an image in front of you. Also sometimes it's like उनका if her husband is standing in front of her or something like that, or कोई politician का घर होता है और जो बस्ती का जो main होता है, he is standing next to her, so she can't tell you, or the kid can't tell you कि क्या हो रहा है. So there are a lot of factors. If you go and talk, you understand कि they're lying. It's on their face. Or sometimes you even don't understand कि वो lie, like they're lying.
Yeah, and so that was like the first skill that I also kind of we look for in a good user researcher, to be able to identify when a person is lying, right? So like there are simple questions, right? So just ask like 500 people, do you like your kid? There's no way that all 500 people like their kid. So, but all of them will say yes, right? Because they are under the fear of your judgment. अगर मैं ऐसा बोलूंगा कि मेरे को मेरा बच्चा नहीं पसंद है तो ये क्या सोचेगा मेरे बारे में? So these things happen.
So like okay, this is something like if you're researching about something that has like already been researched, or something that is already out there, but if you are researching about something like how Aditi ma'am said that about low income families, or something that is not that prominent, or that not that common, then you are not going, you might not get great insights or true insights by talking to people. Then how do you get the right insights, like something that is uncommon?
So correct. So basically, so there are certain sets of in cases where you know that the group that you are talking to there's a good potential to lie. A good way to, so one is there's no way completely out of it. But a small way would be to make them as comfortable as possible, right? Before starting to ask your questions, right? So, bring them something, or sit with them and have tea first. another good way to go about it is to talk about your issues. So tell them how fucked up your life is, right? And so then that kind of will make them open up about theirs, right? कि यार ये मेरे को बॉस ने बोला ऐसा जाके गोल गोल घूमो इतना गर्मी में, अभी मैं क्या करूँ, whatever, right? So tell them how bad is, if you want them to open up about how bad their life is, you tell them first, and so that first step has to be from your side, and so that helps in making them comfortable about things, right? So you'll not believe what happens, right? So यार हमारे कस्टमर्स हैं, वो लोग बिजनेस हमारे खुद के प्लेटफॉर्म पे करते हैं, मेरे को पता है उसका कितना टर्नओवर है, फिर भी जब मैं पूछूंगा तो वो झूठ बोलेगा, उसको भी पता है कि मुझे पता है उसका कितना टर्नओवर है ना, क्योंकि सारे इनवॉइस तो मेरे वहां से जा रहे हैं, फिर भी वो झूठ बोलते हैं. So the good way to go about it is to make them as comfortable as possible, right? That's the only way out. Yeah.
Got it.
Also, one of the tool that we also mention in the methods. So while qualitative analysis, we look for ethnography, right? You just sit and observe your. I mean, if you go over the lower
Audience.
community part, like particularly, but I think it applies to anyone who, like, you observe your user, like how you're using your product and all. So that also gives you a lot of insight in, like, in such cases, if you know they're lying.
Yeah.
So sit and observe how
Yeah.
they're going up with the product.
And so like a good challenge to get genuine insights, like something to try on in your free time is ke भगवे कलर का कुर्ता पहनो and then ask people as to which political party do they prefer. So
And don't say the one that they are going to win.
yeah, so दाढ़ी वाड़ी होना चाहिए, और वो कलर का कुर्ता होना चाहिए, और फिर जाके लोगों को पूछो, right? And so then see, and then kind of challenge yourself के you want to genuinely get good insights, and so it is like a small exercise, but it will help you become better, right? So
Yeah, so it's almost 1:30, right? So
yeah.
any
Awesome,
last question?
great having this conversation. Yeah, so we can answer any last
Yeah.
question if there is any. बहुत कम questions है यार. So या तो मतलब ऐसा था कि ये, so whenever there are less questions, one of the things that I think is कि either like I was super clear, right? कि सबको सब कुछ समझ में आ गया, कि कोई question ही नहीं बचा लाइफ में, और I was so unclear कि समझ ही नहीं आ रहा है कि क्या पूछे इसको. So ये दो में से कोई एक सिनेरियो होता है. देखो क्वेश्चन पूछो यार, I'd love to answer any question if you guys have.
So I had one question, sir.
पूछना.
Now, you said in terms of employability, like you're looking for people who are able to catch lies, or able to, how do you exactly judge these things? How do you identify that this person as a user researcher is going to work from an employer perspective?
Oh, we have, so there are a couple of ways. So the interviews, there are multiple sets of interviews that are designed for this. And the other thing that we do is we have so there are some things that you'll just not be able to identify in like 1 hour of conversation, or 1.5 hour of conversation, right? And so like everybody is a hard worker, everybody is a quick learner, everybody is self-dependent, everybody is a team player, and so 1.5 घंटे में तो तुमको वो इंसान का सच्चाई नहीं पता चलेगा, right? So what we do as an employer is we don't recruit these people. What we do is we grow them internally within the organization. So the person who has been doing, let's say, product management, or the person who's been doing project management, or the person who's been doing customer success, person who's been doing some amount of sales or growth related activities, we essentially groom them to become this, and to become this over a period of time, right? And we teach them, we buy courses for them, and then we guide them through the process of becoming a good user researcher. हमारे जैसे organization छोटा product है, तो मतलब 1-2 million का revenue है, तो उसके लिए मतलब 2 user researchers से ज़्यादा नहीं चाहिए. So 2 people we are able to groom. However, if you were to recruit, like a cutthroat way to go about it would be to recruit a lot of people, and then have a 3-month probation, right? And then have them work with you for 3 months, and then see which person is able to grow into this role, which person is not able to do that, and then let the other people go, and then move on with the people who've been able to make it, right? Survival of the fittest type of a scenario. So that's kind of primarily it. So currently the user researcher, so currently the two people that we have, one of them is also a product manager, and then the other person grew from customer success to becoming a user researcher. So customer success में क्या होता है? The whole day what they're doing is they're hearing our customers curse, right? कि ये बोगस प्रोडक्ट है, क्या बनाया तुमने, ये यहाँ से चलता नहीं है, मेरे को ये इनवॉइस भेजना है, तुम अभी मेरे को बताओ कैसे भेजना है, मेरा पेमेंट नहीं आया, ये नहीं हुआ, वो नहीं हुआ. So that's primarily what they do almost all day long. And so they are the best people who have insights. They know what people are not happy with, which parts of the software people are not happy with, which parts of the software people are happy with, and so we kind of grow them in house. So that's what we do.
Okay, so thank you, sir. So also, sir, I think there's a lot of questions because we are in general a very diverse batch, and not all of us want to exactly do user research as a career as well, right, sir? So we might not have questions with regards to user research because of that.
हाँ, तो कुछ और पूछना. अगर मैं अगर तुम मेरे को अगर ईरान यूएस का न्यूक्लियर ट्रीटी के बारे में पूछेगा तो मेरे पास आंसर नहीं होगा. पर जनरली एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, स्टार्टअप, टीम रिलेशनशिप्स, फाइनेंशियल मैनेजमेंट, वो सब चीज के बारे में भी क्वेश्चन है तो पूछना. कंप्लीटली मेरे को बहुत अच्छा लगता है. सो इवन अदर थिंग्स आई विल बी ऑनेस्ट एंड टेल यू दैट इसका तो आंसर नहीं है. हाँ, पूछना शिवम.
Sir, basically ऐसा होता है कि whenever you would approach a businessman, like my dad is a businessman, I know, and I met their friends as well. Whenever they come up with idea, they always think that their ideas are great. Even if you, as a designer, would suggest them, even their designer suggests them, वो नहीं मानते. So how do you convince them usually?
So great, right? So किसी को मतलब तुम ऐसा सोचो कि तुम उसका ईगो हर्ट करने वाले हो, राइट? अगर तुम किसी को ऐसा बोलोगे ना कि तेरा आइडिया खराब है या बकवास है या जो भी मतलब ट्रुथ है. सो communicating the truth is also a skill in and of itself, right? And so a good way to go about it is to ask them questions जिसके आंसर्स आपको ऑलरेडी पता है, राइट? सो जैसे एज एन एग्जाम्पल, मतलब मैं एक सिंपल सा एग्जाम्पल लेता हूँ कि मान लो कि कोई ग्राफिक बनाया. अभी कोई ग्राफिक है, वो जो ग्राफिक है, मान लो कि तुम्हारे फादर ने न्यूज़पेपर में ऐड डालने का है बिजनेस के बारे में, उसके लिए कोई ग्राफिक बनाया. अभी वो ग्राफिक जो है वो बहुत क्लटर्ड है और गंदा दिखता है, राइट? सो इंस्टेड ऑफ टेलिंग हिम कि यार ये बहुत क्लटर्ड है और ये बहुत गंदा दिखता है, गो टू हिम with solutions, right? So go to him and show him other advertisements from, let's say, similar field or who have similar ad placements, and then show them other ads कि यार देखो ऐसा करे तो कितना better होगा. So instead of telling him that your idea is bad, give him better options. जब तुम लोगों को ऑप्शन देते हो ना तो उनको बताए बगैर उनका सोचने का कैपेसिटी तुम कम कर लेते हो, राइट? सो और ये तुम बहुत जगह पे यूज कर सकते हो, राइट? सो जैसे मैं मतलब सो आई हैव दिस कन्वर्सेशन विद माय वाइफ ऑफन कि वेयर डू वी वांट टू गो टू ईट, राइट? सो अगर मैं ये क्वेश्चन पूछूंगा ना मेरी वाइफ को कि कहाँ पर डिनर करने जाना है, तो उसका आंसर आधे घंटे तक नहीं आएगा. पर अगर मैं उसको ये क्वेश्चन पूछूंगा ना कि आज मैंगो जाना है कि पोएट्री जाना है, तो उसका आंसर तुरंत आ जाएगा कि पोएट्री में मेरे को ये पसंद है तो उधर चलते हैं, राइट? सो गिव देम, सो when you're having this conversation with, let's say, your father, give him a better solution instead of, क्योंकि वो बताना important नहीं है कि आपका आइडिया खराब है. गोल ये है कि जो डिजाइन हुआ है या जो भी आउटपुट है उसको बेटर करना है, right? तो उसके लिए उनको दूसरे ऑप्शंस दो. So that is a better way to go about it.
What will we do if it's a user strategy? They also make the business strategy like मैं ये करूँगा, after इसके बाद ये apply करूँगा. So sometimes it do happens कि वो valid नहीं होता. What can we do?
Same thing will. हाँ, so the exact same thing will apply, right, शिवम? क्योंकि आप क्या कर सकते हो कि जैसे अगर कोई ऐसा बोलता है कि let's say I'm building a product that is great for people who are aged 45 and above, right? And then I say कि मेरे को Instagram की stories पे add करना है, let's say as an example. So let's say if that is the strategy that they've come up with. And that is a wrong strategy because there are very few people who are 45 and above who actually look at Instagram stories or reels. So that is a wrong ad platform to target these people. So then instead of telling them कि आप ये मत करो, a good way to go about it would be कि यार 45 and above वाले जो लोग हैं, they spend a lot more time on YouTube and then go to them with those stats, right? कि these are the channels that they follow or these are the kind of things that they do. So instead of telling them कि ये गलत है, आप उनको ये बताओ कि ये चीज हम लोग कर सकते हैं जो बेटर है. The other thing is also this कि जो आप ये कर सकते हो कि a lot of times people are attached to that idea so much that they don't measure whether that idea implementation was successful or not, right? So ऐसा होगा काफी बार कि जैसे मैंने ऐसा बोल दिया कि यार ये चीज करना है और फिर वो चीज हो भी रहा है और वो वर्कआउट कर रहा है कि नहीं वो नहीं मेजर करते हैं. So the other thing that you may also want to do is ask him questions. So a very simple question like let's say you are my father, right? So I'll ask you a question कि आपको अगर ये करना है तो what are the metrics that we will look at that will tell us that this experiment of user acquisition or whatever strategy was a success, right? कि ऐसा क्या हो जाएगा, क्या मतलब अपना रेवेन्यू 15% ग्रो हो जाएगा, क्या अपना एवरेज ऑर्डर वैल्यू 5% ग्रो हो जाएगा, क्या अपना यूजर चर्न 10% से कम हो जाएगा. सो क्या ऐसा मेट्रिक है जो ये आइडिया इंप्लीमेंट करने के बाद वो मेट्रिक का अगर वो वैल्यू हो जाता है तो आपका आइडिया सक्सेसफुल था, ये अपन फिगर आउट करते हैं, right? And so if you come into a situation where you're not able to change the other person's mind, then you measure that metric and then continuously track that metric and have a conversation with them. Now we've implemented this, and then every 15 days you are able to say that hey, this is मतलब hammer नहीं करने का, but we are not able to achieve this. What should we do? We are not able to achieve this. What should we do? Right? And so that's another good way to go about it.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we can do is if there are more questions, we can have a Google Doc and we can pass it on to Yash, right?
Yeah.
And it will keep we'll have the conversation going on, right? So
Thanks guys for taking the time out. I hope this session was helpful. If anything, I think it has given you some food for thought and some things that you may not have known before. And so thanks Aditi for arranging this, and if there's anything that I can do in the future, do let me know.
thank you so much. I love the energy in the classroom today. So I hope everyone had good insights. So yeah, thank you so much again. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. I'll move out here. Chalo. Bye bye.